There is a man living in my house pretending to be my husband. There is a man living in my house. I do not know him. He looks exactly like my husband, talks like my husband, and remembers all the same things. All the little details about our wedding day, about our life together, about the birth of our children. He seems very kind, and he hasn't tried to hurt me yet, so I thought maybe I was going crazy. I just never could have guessed the horrifying truth about his real identity. The man took me to a psychiatrist, and the two of them tried to explain to me something called Capgras syndrome. It's a disorder where someone believes that a person close to them has been replaced by an imposter. I thought maybe they were right, but the truth was so much more horrifying than that. They told me that I had suffered some very specific brain damage from the car accident I had last year. They asked if I remembered the accident. Of course I did. It was the last time I saw my husband. He disappeared right after that, and was replaced by this imposter. I remember waking up in my hospital bed and seeing that man next to me, crying crocodile tears, and knowing in my heart of hearts that my husband was not there. I think he might be dead. If so, how did this man get rid of his body? How did he manage to impersonate him so well? So well that even my kids are fooled. The children look sad when we are together. I won't allow family outings with him, and I even tried to stop my children being alone with him, but nobody backed me up with that, not even my parents. So even though I hate being in the same room as him, I try to be present whenever he is with the kids. Everyone has told me I'm being silly, but I trust my instincts. That man has replaced my husband, and I'm not sure I want to know why. The result of the visit to the psychiatrist was that I would be given some pills, antipsychotics, and have regular visits with a therapist. I agreed to both, just to placate them, but I didn't intend to do either. Unfortunately, the man pretending to be my husband stood over me every day and made me take the pills. I tried to palm them, to pretend to swallow, but the man proved to be as clever as my husband at figuring out my little tricks, so I started taking them, too scared to upset or anger the man, and I went to the therapist appointments which the man drove me to, and after a while, I began to doubt myself. Had I been so damaged by the accident that I had started to believe something that wasn't true? I had begun my treatment thinking the man was trying to poison me with the pills, but when I didn't become ill, I knew that wasn't true, and the man was so kind, so patient with me. I started to let him help me with things, started to let him sit next to me on the couch to watch TV. One night, whilst we were sitting quietly, he tried to take my hand, and normally I would have withdrawn my own hand. This time, I let him. His hand was warm and soft, and he was gentle with me. I looked across at him, and his eyes were filled with tears, as if he was very happy. It made me smile a little. He looked so much like my husband. Was it possible it was really him? I asked him questions at random about things in my life, about the time before I'd been married. I'd got on the wrong train and had ended up miles and miles away from where I was meant to meet my husband for a date. The man laughed and talked about how he'd had to drive for hours to come and get me, even mentioning the deer he had nearly hit on the return journey and how I'd cried about wasting the evening. He knew everything. How could a stranger know that? I researched Capgras syndrome, and everything I read said the same thing. Seeing it in print made it easier on me. It made sense, and as hard as it was to overcome my gut feelings, I started to realize that the notion that someone could so successfully imitate another person, so well that even their children and parents were fooled, was so unlikely as to be nearly impossible. It was hard to accept, but I finally managed it. And for the first time since my accident, I decided to let the man sleep in the same bed as me. That was until one night when we went to bed, as husband and wife. I didn't want intercourse, it was too soon, and my husband was very understanding. He told me he didn't want to push anything until I was ready, and that my recovery was more important than anything. I felt peaceful and safe, and almost happy for the first time in a long time. I started to drift off, and that was when my husband, thinking I was asleep, rolled over in bed and murmured something under his breath. I couldn't make it out entirely, but it very much sounded like, "At effing last, gullible stupid face." I lay there in the dark, frozen, until he began to snore. Then I crept out of bed and came downstairs. I want to believe I misheard him, that it was just a sigh. I want to believe he is my husband. Then I heard his footsteps rushing downstairs. He came up to me and asked, "Hey babe, what are you doing here this late?" Then from the top of the stairs I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. My husband was descending the staircase, his figure emerging from the shadows, bathed in the eerie glow of the moonlight streaming through the window. He approached me, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Did you hear me earlier?" he asked, his voice soft, his gaze unwavering. I couldn't bring myself to tell the truth, to admit what I had overheard. My voice quivered as I replied, "No, I didn't hear anything, dear." He nodded slowly, his lips curving into a faint, unsettling smile. "Good. It's better that way," he whispered before kissing me on the cheeks. My heart raced, and dread gnawed at my very core. I realized that I hadn't misheard him. He was not my real husband.